All right, we got another episode with Victor from Worldwide, founder Worldwide. And this time it's secrets of coloring up your acros. We got 8 points here we're going to share with you.
Yeah, we're excited. First one will be nitrates.
So nitrates of what? It's going to help me get color in my tank.
So we keep finding the best colors on Acroporas when we keep our nitrates 10 to 25.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me what's causing it, but I think I told you this story before. Years ago, I came back from a frag swap in the middle of the night, and we needed to put the corals back into the store. And it was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I turned the lights on, and I'm putting the corals away. And I say, let me go look at how this was a 300-gallon tank, maybe 10 years ago. I said, let me see how the tank looks at night. Until today, it's the longest extension polyps that I have ever seen in an Acropora in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
It's only on the very tip. They're crystal clear, and they're maybe about an inch long. It was the most incredible thing that I ever seen. And the only time that I seen is that one day, I checked my nitrates and they were over 30. So it took for the nitrates to get that high for the Acroporas to be that happy. There was plenty of nutrients on the water, I'm assuming.
So there's things that are odds here. I agree that I've seen enough to believe that higher nitrates tend to produce better colors. It could be because it's feeding the zooxanthellae differently, creating a richer, darker color. Probably won't produce the pastels that like zeolite tanks are known for, because there, you have a mix. You're actually reducing the zooxanthellae, and it's more the natural pigment, but it's kind of that pastel-like color. So deeper, richer colors coming from higher nitrates. But
in a healthy coral as well.
In a healthy coral. One of the things, though, that like we end up like chasing our tail on some of this stuff. So like I want awesome coloration. So like I'm gonna go, increase nitrates to find that awesome coloration. Well, that definitely applies in a tank like this one. It's full of coral and robust, and it's probably not going to have problems with algae or whatever. If you got 2 frags in your tank, or 3 frags, and they're all 1 inch, and you raise your nitrate up,
might be a problem.
Yeah. So these things are at odds with each other. Like maintaining low pest organisms in the tank and getting the best color out of your tank. So kind of decide where you are in there, and also there's different paths to it. I could go like get some neonitro and like dump nitrate into the tank.
Dose of nitrates.
Or I could just start feeding a little bit more.
That's the preferred method.
Yeah, I could tell my skimmer to only be on, 3/4 of the day or half the day or every other day.
We've been doing that with our protein skimmers. They're performing so well that I think right now we're turning them off Friday, Saturday, and Sundays.
There you go.
So Monday through Thursday, they're off.
We actually say the opposite is like if your nitrates are perpetually rising, well, that's bad. That's not going to go anywhere good. So, either adjust the food input you have or your filtration. But if you have really low nutrients and you're not getting the color you're looking for,
add some more fish, maybe.
I'm sorry?
Add in some more fish, maybe.
Oh, adding more fish as well. Yeah, I mean, they're going to process all that food and turn it into, essentially nitrogen and phosphorus.
Nothing better than the fish waste for the Acroporas.
And so definitely know that nitrate and phosphate, or nitrate specifically, actually, not phosphate, will help the coloration of the coral. But know that there's more than one piece to this, and it's better done in a robust tank and done slowly rather than trying to fix it overnight.
Yeah, and funny that you say that. So the next one says tiny phosphates.
Tiny.
I can't, just for some reason, phosphates can be very dangerous. It can turn your corals brown pretty quick. It can get an algae bloom real quick. But I noticed that you want the smallest of reading, like, I don't know, a 0.08, and below. Mm-hmm. The minute that you go above that 0.08, you're going to see issues. But you want to have a tiny, tiny reading. I mean, just the lowest possible. Don't ask me why, but it's another one that if we can have some nitrates and the phosphates, we deplete them all the way down, the coral won't like it.
So that was different. It's hard because if we're going to kind of like let nitrate rise, but
it's
not
tough.
Phosphate, that means I'm going to have to use something to strip the phosphate out because the food's adding both, right?
Yes.
And so that could be GFO, which sometimes works too well. And if it's working too well in a reactor, maybe you want to use it in a bag. But also using like the lithium chloride, I think it's phosphate E, the Brightwell cells.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Well, one of the cool things I didn't recognize that your guys' team showed me is like...
It binds the phosphates together and it pulls them out of the water column.
But it's precise.
Yes.
Meaning, once I figure out in my tank if my nitrate or my phosphate's 0.1, and I dose 50 milliliters of this stuff, and it drops it to 0.09, I know 50 milliliters is going to drop it in my tank 0.01 every time, right? I can figure out the right dose to try to peg where I want to be.
We swear by that product. It's an incredible product. We've been using it for a long time.
Totally different thing. So phosphate, by the way, different than nitrate, is also considered a nutrient. And nutrients, the word comes from like usually agriculture, because nitrogen and phosphorus is like a fertilizer essentially, right? And also historically one of the things that limits growth. In our case, we actually want that in some cases, right? But also in the water, it does a different role. The phosphate does. So the phosphate actually poisons the coral from growing. So the way the coral grows is it takes components of carbon and alkalinity and calcium and binds them together inside. All right. Well, what happens with phosphate is if there's too high phosphate, it'll bind on the top of that, and then all of a sudden the calcium alkalinity bounces off. The charge of the crystal is no longer right. They call it poisoning the surface. So that's probably one of the reasons why you don't see good color when you have high phosphate. Is literally we've interrupted the normal biological function of this coral, and we hit its stability on everything. But if you're interrupting the normal biological functions of these corals and preventing things like natural precipitation, expect it to just be generally unhealthy.
Yeah.
All right, next one.
Next one will be balance of light and nutrients. That's a good secret to coloring up acros. So the first thing that comes into mind on Acropora is super clean water and tons of lights, right? We just discussed you need some nitrates and some phosphates, but in order to be able to deliver a lot of light, you have to have those nutrients. Without that, you're going to see bad results. You're going to see the corals bleaching. They're not going to grow in a good shape. I noticed that a lot.
I find that nutrients, flow, and light are like all interconnected.
They are.
And I think actually the Dana Riddle has a good article or a MACNA presentation on like supercharging photosynthesis, right? Because if you crank up the light, but you don't crank up the flow, we're going to poison the coral.
You're going to burn the corals,
Yeah, they're going to bleach. If we crank up the flow with the light, it's going to be able to deal with all those excess oxidants, right? But if we crank up the flow and the light and we're supercharging photosynthesis, but now we're short on phosphate and nitrates or nitrogen phosphorus,
in the column.
Now we're missing an important component of the matrix. So like all of these things should go together. If I'm going to ride the razor edge of light, I should probably ride the razor edge of flow, and I should make sure that I have adequate nitrogen and phosphorus.
It's such a combination. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. It's no difference that, think about it, when you pull a coral from the ocean, we were talking about it earlier, like the power has got to be super high. You can bring it from the ocean to the aquarium and get used to it, but you can't grab it from the aquarium and take it back into the ocean because it's just too much of a change. It's shock.
So one of the reasons that is not as clear, I believe anyway, as some of the other things in reefing, is because in the ocean, it's again 0 nitrate, 0 phosphate. Both are basically undetectable in a pristine reef. Lagoon, different thing. But in a pristine reef that's filled with acros, usually 0 nitrate and phosphate measurable. But it's got all that prey. Right, it's got all the bacteria. It's got
all the nutrients.
It's got fish waste. It's got
flow, the right nutrients, the right numbers.
It's going to be able. It's going to ride the razor edge of the sun beating on it. It's got tons and tons of flow, and it's also got the nutrients from the plankton and all the other things that are in the water, capturing the prey, giving it nitrogen, phosphorus. In our tanks, we don't have all of that natural prey. It just doesn't seem to thrive in the same way.
It's kind of like when people say natural light is affecting my tank. I can see how sometimes if the sun is just hitting it too hard, it's just not able to process that sunlight like it does in the nature, you know?
So that doesn't necessarily mean also that crank up your nutrients, you're going to crank up your light. But if you're not getting the results that you want, slowly let the nutrients rise. And we talked about this in an earlier episode, which is also take some photos of it so that you're not just guessing.
Based on your eye, like you're seeing the results before and after.
Yeah, you can look at it like 1 month today and a month from now, and you can like compare these things and decide whether or not you're getting the color that you like. Because sometimes I would say almost all the time, you'll never look at it and remember it exactly the way that it looked last week,
No, you
and
won't.
certainly not last month.
No.
And what you'll find is even if you get in small growth, you're like, if I got that now, what happens if I let that go out now 6 months? Then it would definitely be noticeable, but you might not have done that. You might not have waited all 6 months to find out if you weren't really paying attention.
Yes,
So,
it's true. It's keeping track of it, you know.
this one was actually surprising to me, but number 4, secret of coloring up acros.
Amino acids. A couple years back, I talked you into amino acids. Did you see any results?
Well, we did an experiment on it and it transformed the tanks. And this was actually the good example again of in person. Yeah, it kind of looked better week to week. But when we played back every week, when we actually documented, like, whoa, man, these tanks totally transformed, richer, deeper colors, and went from like looking like really, really thin tissue. And you know what? Dude, this stuff is actually, amino acids, for those who don't know, are the building blocks of protein.
Yes.
Right? And protein is like the tissue that it's
All
going
the
to build.
fatty acids they need.
Yeah, and it's able to get it. And one of the things that actually was interesting to me, somebody said this to me once, is like, because you're dosing, like, I could take my little bottle of KZ
Yeah, a couple drops, yeah.
couple drops, and I'm like, well, what did it do?
Yeah.
Who knows? But one of the places where you can really see it actually is interesting was with a Red Sea's like a AB food, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like kind of that neon color when you dump it in the tank. And when you dump that little cup of the amino acid mixture into the tank, and when it does that, you can really kind of visually grasp like, oh, wow.
Where it's all gone.
It's touching every coral surface in the whole thing. And
yeah,
now,
you think a couple drops doesn't do much, but when you see it with the
you
color.
see, seeing's believing. So it doesn't need to be green to actually do that. But when you see that, you can say, I get how this stuff is now available to it. And what we're basically doing is compensating for the fact that we don't have all that natural prey in there. And nitrogen and phosphorus actually just mix with a bunch of other stuff to try to make protein. Instead, we actually dose the building blocks of protein. And lo and behold, specifically what you guys said to me was you take unhealthy corals that are otherwise look like they're going to die, and you start feeding them the amino acids and they transform. And I'm like, wow. Because going from various degrees of healthy is one thing, but when you take something that's like on its deathbed and it comes back to life, like, oh, that is a compelling thing to see.
It is.
Right?
It's beautiful to see.
Actually, you know what? I used to get reports of that all the time with Reef chili, right?
Yeah.
And so people are saying, I have all these dead coral, or these corals
And
that
they start
dying,
feeding.
they start feeding on the particulate foods, which is essentially artificial prey, right? It's the little particulate foods that they'll capture and artificial prey. And all of a sudden, corals that look like they're dying came back. But these are things, this is like high nutrient food. It's high phosphorus, high nitrogen, high protein diet.
Funny you say that. So we have a rescue tank that is underneath one of our tanks. It's an 80-gallon tank. And it's got two things. It's got a heater and a penguin filter. And that tank doesn't get water changes maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Set and forget. We don't test the water. The tank is super dirty. 1/3 of the corals that go in there, they come back. You go back 2-3 months later, they're actually in there thriving and happy.
And come back.
Because it's just heavy nutrients,
And, like all of the biggest acro fans out there, like, I mean, using Julian's Acropora for ages.
Yes,
right?
amino acids.
Yeah. And, like, I think I come from this weird world of defending against snake oils. Like, it's just like if I don't really see it or know it, or
Gotcha.
like, it's hard for me to believe. And then you use statements like, well, I had a thriving tank and I didn't use amino acids, and I'd use those things. But you know what I didn't have is I had a mixed tank with some really easy to stuff in, some bird nests and whatever in there or whatever.
Yeah, that shouldn't count.
Mostly philia, whatever. I wasn't referring that against a tank that's just filled with acros.
Yeah.
In which case, there is no question. Now, also, if you have 8 million fish and you're feeding constantly, you may not need that.
No, there's a lot of food. Tons of fish is a good recipe.
But if you just have like 3 fish and you feed once a day, you're probably
won't need it.
Prime candidate for seeing benefit from using something like an amino acid.
Yep.
All right. Number 5 actually is no pests. Secrets of coloring up acros.
So first thing, you might have acroporas growing in your tank and they're looking beautiful. And one day you notice that the colors are a little off. First thing we do, we check our nitrates, we check our phosphates, salinity, make sure alkalinity hasn't been going up and down, make sure our magnesium is on point. Then when you check all of those and nothing's wrong, the next thing to check for is pest. You want to look for a few things: Acropora and flatworms. You want to look for red bugs; they're pretty known, and black bugs. Those are the three main parasites that you want to look for. Red bugs more than anything. They're very hard to spot until they're like in abundance. You don't notice them. It's like you see like a little gold dot in the Acropora. They when they start chewing the coral goes brown. Same with Acropora and flatworms. You notice on the bottom, I mean, not all the time, but if like here you say you have them, but they're being eaten by the wrasses. If you don't have nothing eating them, you keep noticing that the coral it start going from the bottom up. It just keeps going. It gets brown, then it turns pale. Then you start seeing bite marks after it turns pale because they've been getting all the coloration. The flatworms been eating the actual skin out of the coral, you know.
So I'll tell you the first sign that we saw it in this one was on the blue effluo. And so the effluo is this really solid blue color and it's beautiful coral. And then all of a sudden it started
Brownish.
to turn brown, right? And then you saw tissue at the base being removed. And then you actually saw thin tissue on the surface of the effluo as well, right? Which eventually opened up. And this is a sure signs of
Something is going on.
Yeah, it was acro-eating flatworms on this thing. And so you know, if I could caught it earlier, I would have probably just noticed it from the fact that it's turning brown.
Yeah.
Right? There's one story here underlying all of this is a healthy acro is a colorful acro.
Yes.
An unhealthy one, I don't know why these things are tied together. Like why nature decided that only healthy organisms are going to be beautiful, colorful, but when they're unhealthy, they just turn brown.
You can tell. Or pale.
It is
Brown or pale.
definitely true. So, you know, if you see that your corals are turning brown, think about how you're going to fight those pests. Some people will try to eradicate them from the entire tank. I don't know if that's always necessary.
No.
You can use things like in this case, we have acro-eating flatworms. We use some flatworm stop, and we use the
fish,
the couple of wrasses that are in there.
Turkey baste
them off every now and then, no problem. I would never tear this tank down to try to solve that because I'd likely just kill the tank. I might as well start over, and there's no need to.
Looks beautiful.
The next one here is actually a secret of coloring up acros. We kind of talked about it earlier already, but flow.
Flow. That's got to be one of the most important one. I think even more than light. Flow in the last few big tanks that we did, we put this power heads from Pentaray. Hydro Wizards they're called, I think they are.
Yep.
They deliver, there's just one of those pumps delivers, I think the medium size, I think is the ECM 63, I want to say is the number of it. It delivers 15,000 gallons for that thing. Without that, I don't know if we would have been able to deliver such a large tank like the 1500, the all 900 gallon tank without the type of flow. I just noticed that without them, they're not able to wash themselves off per se. You even notice when you see the Acroporas, they get the slime coming off of them. That's what I noticed. They're able to get all the nutrients delivered to them, all the food gets to them.
So that's the bit here, especially with a high energy coral like acros that are getting a lot of light, is you got to think about it is flow is essentially like the circulatory system for the tank, right? Everything that coral needs to get from the water is delivered from flow.
Yes.
Everything that it needs to get rid of, like the oxidants and wastes, is going to happen from flow because it doesn't have its own like heart or anything to pump it out, right?
Yeah.
And so also there's something called the boundary layer, and this was in one of Dana Riddle's like a supercharged photosynthesis MACTA videos as well. But like it actually has to hit the coral at the right velocity to get through its boundary layer of water that actually doesn't move on the surface of the coral. So if it doesn't hit it hard enough, nothing really transfers, and nothing's too strong of a word, but very little transfers between the tissue in the fluid inside the coral and the water outside. But if you hit it hard enough, it gets through the boundary layer, and that is when you start to get rid of all the waste, get rid of the oxidants, get the elements in there, get the nitrogen, the phosphorus, get everything that the coral needs. And then more importantly, as you scale up the light again, the more importance that it has to get the right flow in there to process all the biological functions that are happening simultaneously.
I believe that. I mean, I showed up to a customer's house before. He had a 300-gallon tank, and he had two MP60s, and he had them halfway down. So we added 4 more MP40s. We put 2 in the back, 2 on the bottom. The tank was doing good, and he at first, when I first told him he needed extra power, he thought I was just trying to sell him more power heads, and I really believed the tank needed more flow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that, and within 3 to 4 weeks, the growth tips that they start coming out of the tank, I wish you could have seen it. It was just overnight. Within 3 or 4 weeks, we're seeing the most growth that we ever seen, and I think it was based on flow. You know, think about it. You got a 300-gallon tank. You got a 2 MP60s. You're moving, I don't know, call it 10,000 gallons of water per hour. You have 4 more MP40s. You're doubling in the amount of water that you're moving. The tank was bare bottom, so we were able to move that much water, and therefore we saw a big difference on coloration and growth actually too.
You know, one of the interesting things when we were talking to Josh at your facility, and I was trying to pin him down, like, just give me an X, you know, 50X, 100X, 25X, and he just like wouldn't do it. And I'm like, come on, man, people want to know. They just want some guideline.
How much can you deliver without hurting the coral, you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
As much as it will tolerate.
Yeah.
But also, like, the part that I didn't get that day, but I got later, was what he was really trying to also get at was there's dead spots all over in your aquascape. Fix those. It's not about 20X or 50X or 100X. It's about flow everywhere in the tank. And so like when we talked about the bare bottom, if you have the bare bottom, now I can shoot water across the bottom really easy and, you know, keep it turbulent all over. If I move the aquascape off the back of the tank, I can get it
wash
behind
it from the back. We do that.
And also, if I have 2 islands here, if I move it out the back, I can actually flush water out in between. And also, I can just grab a couple of tunses or something that's aimable and shoot it down there, right? Because we've taken our flow meter, this meter that measures velocity, and like right in front where you got 2 power heads aimed at each other. Well, sure enough, right there, man, the velocity is really high, right? And you can measure it going back and forth. But if I go in between the 2 rock structures and I put it there, it's 0, man. There's almost none. And if you're wondering, go take an air tube and blow some air into.
And you see it going up slowly.
Yeah, everywhere else will be turbulent, but then you can start to see all the areas where it just like goes up.
I'm telling you, I go to a customer's house and I tell them you need more flow, and they go, nuh-uh. And I go, here, give me some food. So when they see the food, I say, look how it goes. And then just watch it in the middle. You see the food just sits there. Just sitting there. Like, you're not getting flow here. That water's not moving.
Okay, so, and then in that same frame of mind, so like if somebody's in a fight against this one, it's like, okay, well, that acro over here needs 50X, but you're telling me the one between the 2 rocks needs 0? That's not true. Like, there's no way that's true.
No.
And so I've also found that flow can be one of the bigger solutions too to getting acros that die underneath, right? Or then when they're getting shadowed. So part of it is light, but I've just found that if I keep a lot of flow going around,
it'll be okay.
That they actually keep their tissue underneath as well.
Yeah.
And probably part of that is just because they're helping the coral pump the nutrition throughout the rest of its tissue that isn't normally being lift.
Yeah.
You know, helping it get the nutrition where it needs to go.
Yeah.
So flow, big part of coloration as well, especially like avoiding the browns and like not just losing the tissue underneath, but often it'll turn brown. If you can get a lot of flow in there, you should see different coloration in your coral.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one here is time versus stability, right?
Okay, so to color up the acroporas, it takes time. No matter how much the nitrates are right, you got the right flow. We were talking about earlier, all of those things, you can be delivering amino acids, you have a little bit of phosphates. But if the tank is too new and the acroporas are freshly in there, there's nothing you can do. It takes time. And then also stability is going to help you color them up. What do I mean by stability? You could have not so perfect numbers. You could go, let's say your salinity could be at 23, your nitrates could be 30, Your salinity could be some way down, but as long as you keep those same numbers, you're going to succeed on coloring up your acroporas. Too many people chase numbers more than stability, and I think they're wrong when they chase that.
I think the time stability, interesting component of that is like when I buy a coral and I have it come to my house and it doesn't look as good as it did in the store, it's because it was a very major destabilization event for it to be clipped off, turned into a frag, shipped to my house, put in a totally different water, light, all that stuff. Yeah, and so the solution to that is you could be disappointed, or you could just know it will, if as long as I keep things stable, time will solve it. It will become the same beautiful coral as I was seeing before. I just need to give it time to do it in a stable environment.
Perfect example. BRS 180, is that what that is over there?
Oh, up front. 900.
900.
Yeah.
Okay. We did that tank, what, 3.5 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And you struggle on the first year or so?
Mm-hmm. That was my first real attempt at bare bottom dry rock. Learned some lessons there.
I remember Joe from Unique Corals came and did the rock work.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we did that tank from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was here maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I was impressed of how beautiful it looks. And I remember the first year you were kind of frustrated.
There's
the thing wasn't taking off, and you were doing everything right.
I don't want to let her hear it, but it's probably nicer than the 160, right? It is a beautiful, beautiful tank, and
it's looking gorgeous.
A lot of those corals lost their color during that thing, but they got them all back, right? So time and stability, like
that was a stable tank.
Yep.
You guys don't mess with it much.
Never,
and you give it time.
That's
what I mean. That's part of the
secret of color. Anything.
And that's part of the secret of coloring them up. And that's why the tank looks so good.
In fact, we have changed like lighting a couple of times on it. Changed.
What happened when you did that?
Well, so the first time we changed from the G4s to the G5s, like we had a grid of like too many. It was like the ideal coverage, but it was so many of these lights. And then when we found out that there was a wider spectrum from the G5s and the wider coverage, like, let's just go to 4 of these things. That actually went really well. Like that's actually was right around the time where that tank just started to take off, right? This time we changed it up to the G6s because you see, we held it up there and there was no question. Some of these corals just look better when you had the wider spectrum on it. We'll talk about that in a second, but like there was no question. But what we did is measured the hell out of it, right? So we went out and found all of the par numbers.
Trying to keep it the same.
Right? Yeah, we got the same
stability.
Height. Yeah.
See, you took the time to do your research.
Mm-hmm. And try to make it exactly the same. And because of that tank didn't skip a beat.
Funny you say that. You switched the Gen 4s on the 1,500 gallon tank for the Gen 6. We just did it 5 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from 100% on the lights to 60%, and we're getting almost the same match. So we're trying to get them, instead of just swapping them and hoping something's going to be the same,
You know, so I was talking to, I don't want to like spill the beans here, but I was actually talking to Josh about that. I was like, hey, dude, asked him a like legitimate question, like, do you really want to change all these out? Because you're in a grow out facility and stability matters. Like we could change everything out and all of a sudden you could slow your growth, which means like we're going to produce fewer corals here. Like, you want to do that? Yeah. And what he said is, I don't remember what tank it was, but he's like, hey, we changed one of these things out already. And there were corals that were really dull in the edges. And all of a sudden they got all of their color, right? And the only explanation I had for that is maybe there's extra, I mean, we're going from G4 all the way up to 6 now. Yeah. So there's some significant differences there. But one of them is so much wider. So it's probably getting more light to those edges and taking those otherwise browned out corals and like getting them brighter because they're getting more light. But could also be the spectrum changes that have happened, since G4, which is pretty old, right? Which also leads into one that I wanted to add here.
What is it?
The secret of coloring up acros. And this one is fluorescence versus color pigment,
all right?
Right? Okay, so a lot of people don't know this, but I've shared this all the time, is the reason that a leaf outside looks green is because it's absorbing all of the colors of the spectrum from the sun other than green. It's reflecting green.
On a tree outside.
Yeah, on a tree, I'm sorry. Yeah. The leaf is reflecting green back at the eye. So the same thing in the coral in the tank here. So if I turn on the white lights only, right, and I see red, it's because there's red in that white it's not absorbing it, it's reflecting the red back of my eye. The same thing with green, the same thing with blue. Those are all, for the most part, color pigments, meaning like this tank, this coral has a blue pigment in it, has a green pigment, has a yellow pigment. Yeah. Those are all normal because in a white light, essentially I'm putting all of the colors of the visible spectrum on it, right? And it's absorbing some, bouncing them back. Now there's another one that we all like, which is called a fluorescent pigment, right? So fluorescence is strange because what happens when you only turn the royal blue channel on? Based on what I just said, everything should look blue, right? Because I only put blue in.
But it doesn't.
So there should be only blue coming back at the eye because green doesn't exist in here. With a fluorescent pigment, it's actually taking that blue one and transforming it into a different energy wavelength and shooting green back at my eye. So you can see it. If I only turn on the blues, go look around your tank and see anything that isn't blue is a fluorescent pigment in the tank that is transforming that blue into something else. You'll see it with a lot of oranges. You'll see it with yellows. You'll see it sometimes with reds. You'll definitely see it with green. I mean, the green slimers and stuff of the world. So there's lots and lots of these tanks that have fluorescence. So the cool part about that is once you know that, and the secret of coloring up your acros, some people are like, trying to crank up the blues, hoping that it's going to make all of those colors pop like that.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. It's not going to do it unless it has that fluorescent pigment to begin with. So make the decisions when you're buying the corals at the store you're at. Like, does this one have the fluorescent pigment if that's important to me? And specifically, it's important to you if you're going to run your tank really blue. If you're going to run it really blue, then it gets kind of washed out blue other than those fluorescent things. However, if you like to run your tank at a whiter look, well, now all those natural pigments, the reds and the oranges, you can see them different. Like, we're going to do actually a series on this one because, like, I really wanted to get down to, like the Radion G6 has like a wider spectrum. And like normally what we've done is like we'll show it on a graph, we'll show the mixing, we'll explain chlorophyll C2 and carotenoids and why like it's beneficial to the organism's energy needs. Well, great. But also, does it make the corals look better? And so we actually did a series, or not a series, but we did a bunch of test shots to show how each one of these individual peaks makes each one of these corals. And when you combine them together, how you can add, like if it has pink tips, it's because there was red light in there. If it didn't have the red light, those pink tips don't show up.
Wow.
Yeah, and so how do we blend all these different spectrums together? And specifically, with the Radion, I got 8 channels. Now, yes, I'm actually playing a little bit of willy-nilly here. This is a pro level thing to do. But if you got a tank full of acros, you're probably pro. I probably wouldn't do this for your first time, but you can actually adjust these things to highlight the specific colors in your tank and bring them out. So I'm working on this series. We'll share it with you. You guys can see it. But like, this is one of those things. If you want a secret of coloring up your acro, turn up the blues won't make a natural pigment turn a different color. It's just not, you're actually not going to see it. In fact, I've seen a lot of people are like, bummed out when they see the tank looks okay and 10K light, and they go all the way to that blue and they're hoping it's going to look like pop.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, because it doesn't have the fluorescent pigments.
Wow.
That's important to you. You have to buy it that way for the most part.
A nice coral.
All right. So we learned about coloring up acros. Next, secrets of a successful farm. You're going to share all the secrets of how Worldwide does it.
Let's do it.
That's coming up next.
We'll see you guys soon.